All right, welcome back. This is our next video, continuing our lesson in the statistics part of our Unit 1 notes. Here we are, going to our notes. All right, here we are picking up on page 19. We're looking at measures of dispersion. So in our previous video, we looked at measures of central tendency with our mean, median, mode, and mid-range. We're now looking at range and standard deviation. So the measures of dispersion is just like what it says. It's dispersing out our data now. So now we're looking at how how our data is spread out, okay? We're only going to look at range and standard deviation. Okay, so here we are, the range. How do we find the range? It's almost as close to the mid-range, so don't get these too confused. To find the range, we're going to use this formula where we're looking at the largest value minus the smallest value. And that's it. Okay, largest minus smallest. Whereas the mid-range, we added the smallest plus the largest and divided by 2. Okay, so make sure we know that the range is simply the largest minus the smallest. So we want to find the range of this raw data they're giving us here in number 7. All right, here's our data. So the range will equal the largest value they give us is 6. And we're going to subtract it. Oh, sorry, not 6, but 7. Thanks for correcting me. 7. And then subtract it by the smallest, which will be 0. So we find out that 7 is our range. All right, so in our previous video, we looked at a stem and leaf plot. Here we are looking at our stem and leaves. They give us some data. We don't even have to pull the data out. They're not asking us to do that. Knowing that we know the range is the largest value minus the smallest value, and knowing how we can read this stem and leaf plot to pull that information out, we're just going to pull out what we need. Identifying our largest value. So our largest equals what? So here we are coming all the way down to our last row, 40 something. 40 what? So 48 is our largest value. And our smallest, so it's going to be here in our first row, is 1 is our 10th place and 0 is our 1's place, so 10. Right? So we have our largest and we have our smallest value. So now our range equals 48 minus 10, which is 38. And it's just that simple. Okay? Now, let's look at standard deviation. Now, we have 2 different types of problems or standard deviation formulas out there in the world, but we're only going to look at this one. So please do not go and look on the internet for a formula, because then you're going to get confused about which formula you should be using. You should just use the one that's here in your notes, all right, for our sample, okay? The standard deviation will be given, this formula will be given to you on the test. So you don't have to memorize this. You don't have to know it. I'm going to give it to you on the problem that you're going to be working, right? So let's go over the parts to make sure we know what's being asked. Standard deviation equals, this is the square root sign. You have a button in your calculator, usually on the face button that talks about a square root, or it may be in a second function for some of our calculators. Then we already talked about the summation of what? They want us to find. Here it is, our data item, that X, minus the mean, we already talked about that. And then take that information and square it. And once you take that, you're going to take all those values and add them up. Then divide by n. We know n is the total number of our data items, minus 1. So first things first, when you're dealing with a formula, you always want to work from the inside out. All right, so you got to get the pieces to get to the whole. And we talked about that in our sets part. So when they want us to answer a question, you got to get the pieces first so you can answer the big question. So what we are going to do is we're going to find all the missing pieces so that we can put it in this formula so we can answer the question. Let's try it out. Here's the data, raw data that they're giving us. We know that we need our n. Let's find our n first. So our n equals, we know how to do that now, counting the raw data. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So our n equals 5. Now we need to find a mean. So now here we are, working from the inside out. Now this is our bulk of the part right here at the top. We know we need a mean. So we need to find a mean, okay? The mean of this information that they're giving us. So here's our mean. We know the mean formula. We got to add up all of our data items and divide by the total number of data items. We just found that. So we have 4 plus 5 plus 8 plus 16 plus 17 all over 5. All right, we're going to do all that. And when we do that, you should get waiting. Okay, on the top, you add all that up, you should have gotten 50. And then divide it by 5. Reduce it, and you should have gotten 10. So 10 is our mean. We need that to find that information in the top. We have our n. We're almost there. Now we need to find this information in our parentheses so that we can then sum it up. But we needed the mean, so that's why we found that. We're going to use this table to help us find that information. You see here we have our data values that we listed. These are the data values. We listed them in our table. This next column, we have to find out what x minus the mean is, right? Because then we got to actually work that, we got to square those values. But first we got to find out what the values are. So in our next column, this should be your x minus x bar. Okay? But then we got to square those. So your final column here should be x minus x bar, or your mean, and then squared. You see how we're building what we need to get this information. Okay, so here we are with our data item. That's our x. Here's the mean, we just found it. So now we need to construct this column. So we have 4 minus 10, and I'm writing it out so we can see what's happening. 5 minus 10, 8 minus 10, 16 minus 10, 17 minus 10. That's what we have. Now we got to find those values. Okay, so our data item minus the mean. So 4 minus 10 is a negative 6. 5 minus 10 is a negative 5. 8 minus 10 is a negative 2. 16 minus 10 is a positive 6. 17 minus 10 is a positive 7. All right, we see where we're going now. Now that we've constructed and found the values for our first column or second column, now we got to get that third column. So now the values that we found, we're going to square those. So we have, I'm going to write it out so again, so we can see what's happening this first time. The next time, our next example, I won't write all of this. So we have negative 6 raised to the second, negative 5 raised to the second, negative 2 raised to the second. You see, these parentheses are going to be really important when you're putting this in your calculator, because you know that these numbers got to be positive when they come out. 6 raised to the second, 7 raised to the second. Negative number raised to the second power or even root always comes out to be positive. Okay. So now we got to square these values. You can pause the video right here and go ahead and square them, and then we can come back and check your answers. All right. So when we square them, negative 6 squared should give us a positive 36. Negative 5 squared should give us a positive 25. Negative 2 squared should give us a positive 4. 6 squared is 36. 7 squared, 49. All right, you should have gotten all those values. So now you see we have the column representing this part of our formula, but to sum it up, right? Now we got to add up that column. So now we got to take and find the sum of what's going on here. Okay, of this column. All right, so now add all that stuff up. When you add all this up, you should get $150. So now we have our missing part. So this is our numerator. Okay, the numerator. This is the sum of x minus x bar all squared. Okay, that's what we just found. All right, so now let's put it all together. We got all the pieces now. Okay, here we go. So remember, you got to put the square root. That's so important. So we have standard deviation. Oh, STD. No, we don't want that. So let's put STDEV, standard deviation. Okay, equals the square root. Okay, now we got to put the stuff underneath. So our numerator part here is 150. So 150 divided by, our denominator is n minus 1. So our n we know is 5, and we're going to subtract 1 from it. So 5 minus 1. All right, we done filled in. Now we can evaluate everything. So here's my square root. We have 150 all over 4. We can divide. That's 150 divided by 4. 1. Does that simplify here? Let's see. That gives us 37.5. Then equals the square root of 37.5. Okay. So now, this right here, this is our exact answer. Okay. This right here. But remember, they might ask you to do some rounding or give the approximate answer. So if we want the approximate answer, we're going to take this and put it in our calculators. Now, if you have that calculator that will leave it as a radical and it won't give you the decimal number, that's where you actually use your toggle button, which is usually located right up above your equal sign. Okay, so your bottom towards your bottom right, you should have an arrow, double arrow button that goes both ways. That's how you change from fraction to decimal and back again. All right, so you would put your radical in. So find your square root button. Again, it's usually in a second function, or your math button is under math. I think it's option 3 or 4, something like that. You'll see it. In your graphing calculator or your scientific calculator, it's usually in the second function. Again, I would have to look at your calculator in order to see it. And you'll need to practice to see how your calculator wants you to do this. Either you get your symbol first, or you put your number in first and then get your symbol. Okay, but you got to practice your calculator to find out. All right, so then you push enter and you get this funky decimal, and your funky decimal should be starting off with a 6. Right, mine is 6.1237 24357, and this is my approximate answer. Okay, that's my approximate answer. All right, but what if they want me to round it to 2 decimal places? So that's 2 decimal places, that 2 is there, the 3 behind it is not a 5 or greater. So when I'm rounding it to do 2 decimal places, I would get 6.12. So this is approximate all right. This is approximate to 2 decimal places. What about 3 decimal places? So the 3 decimal places would be the 3 here, but right behind it is a 7. That's definitely greater than the 5. So I need to take action on that 3. So that would be 6.124. And this answer is my approximate to 3 decimal places. You see what's happening there, right? So finding our standard deviation, it looks like a lot because I put all the extra writing in there. But a lot of the stuff you can do in your calculator, you just have to make sure you be careful. In the homework, you're going to have problems that's going to have decimal numbers in it. So make sure you're putting it into your calculator correctly with those decimal numbers. And do not round anything in the middle of your problem ever. Okay, never round in the middle. Write every single thing that comes out of your calculator, and you don't round until you get to the very end of your problem. That's when you round, okay, because it will throw your answer off every time. All right, let's try this next example. Here's our data. First things first, we need an n. So n equals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. Then we need a mean. Right. So here's some steps just in case. Number 1. Find n. Step 2. Solve for your mean. Okay. So our mean here, x equals, we have 2, 3, adding all this goodness up, 10, 20, 27, 28. Did you get 28? I did too. So 28 all over 7, and that is 4. So my mean is 4. Step 3. Construct your table. You have your data items, right? So your next column. So here's column headings. You have data values. Then you have x minus x bar. Then you have x minus x bar all squared. Okay. Those are your column headings. Then calculate. So here we have x minus x bar. And then we have x minus x bar all squared. So if you want to write this one out, that's fine. That one always usually helps to see it visually. Again, you could just do this all in your calculator. So we have 1 minus 4, 2 minus 4, 3 minus 4, 3 minus 4, 3 minus 4, 7 minus 4, 9 minus 4. All right. So now when we subtract, we get a negative 3. We get negative 2, negative 1, negative 1, negative 1. 7 minus 4 is a 3. And 9 minus 4 is 5. How do you know if you're on the right track with this column? Here's a little hint. If you add this column up, it should equal 0. Let's give it a shot. You have 5 and 3, that's 8. 8 minus 1 minus 1 minus 1, that's 5. And then minus 2 minus 3, that's 5. So they cancel each other out. So this equals 0. Okay, this column should equal to 0. That's how you know you're on the right track, right? So that's just a tidbit. It's not necessary, but it does help. So if you want to do like a point check right here in the middle of your problem to see if you're on the right track, this is where you would do it, okay? All right, so now let's go ahead and square it. So making sure we know everything should be positive in this column. So negative 3 squared gives me a positive 9. This is a positive 4, a 1, 1, 1. Here it is a positive 9 and 25. All right, so now we want to add these things up. So the sum, right, equals 50. So now we have our missing information. We got it all now. So our fourth step. All right, plug in your missing pieces of information into your formula and solve it. Here it is. Standard deviation, we're talking about the square root of 50 divided by 7 minus 1. So square root of 50 divided by 6. Do some calculations. So you do 50 divided by 6. Gives us a very funky looking decimal. All right. But you can simplify your answer. And we see that that simplifies into 25 over 3. So we have the square root of 25 divided by 3. That's our exact answer, right? But now, taking that square root, and that gives us our approximate answer, which is 2.8867, can't see, 6751346. You should have gotten all of those values, so make sure I got all of them. Okay, and we know that this is our approximate. All right. Again, what if they want us to round to 2 decimal places? Here's my second decimal place. Right behind it is the 6, which is higher than a 5. So we need to round that 8 up once. So we get 2.89. Okay, and that is our approximate rounded to 2 decimal places. Let's do our 3 decimal places. So here's 3 decimal places, the 6, But behind the 6 is the 7, so we're going to take action on that 6. So we have 2.88, now 7. Okay. And this is approximate to 3 decimal places. All right. So we've learned and seen how we can calculate our standard deviation. Again, make sure you're putting the information in correctly. I think that's probably the more challenging part, is actually just putting it into your calculator correctly. Making sure it helps to write it out like you did, we see that we did here. If it helps to do it, don't try to do it all in your calculator. You may get some things incorrect. So sometimes to start out, write it out first, and then based on your comfort zone, then you can start moving up to doing most of the work in the calculator, okay? But start where you feel comfortable. But the point is making sure you're getting all your steps in, and that very last step of putting that radical back into play when you're plugging it into your formula. That's really important. Take action on that radical, especially if they ask you to round your answer. All right, well, I hope this video helps us get through our measures of dispersion, and I'll catch you on the next video. All right, see you later.